got another narrative, another story. And I love these things because of the fact that they're able to share a little bit of behind the scenes. Mike and I, we've actually known each other for quite some time. We've done a lot of business together in some other aspects and some other fields, but you don't know Mike yet. And I think part of this story, I don't know either. But we were talking in the green room and just kind of giving me a little glimpse of what to expect today. And I'm like, wow, I did not know this about Mike. So, Mike, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking the time to share with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tim. And obviously, for those that have been following Tim for a while, like I have, anytime you get a chance to have a conversation with Tim, you do it. So honored to be here, and thank you so much for just invite me in.
I appreciate that, man. All right, well, let's jump in and get started. And this is what I like to do. It's the 30-second. We're in an elevator. Sometimes it's 90 seconds, and that's okay. Who is Mike Thomas?
Mike Thomas is a husband, a dad, follower of Jesus, someone who is trying to build a business around his life. I want to
Mm,
live my life first, and I want to work second. Doesn't mean that I work less hard. It just means that I know what I'm working for,
mm,
and I can truly show up my best, not just for my clients, but for my family and for myself.
mm. Yeah, I love that. And that's so much about the identity. And I like, we were talking in the green screen or in the green room just a little bit about the aspect of all of the elements that go in to create that. And you just briefly shared. So maybe we just jump into some of those stories of what it was like as a kid. Give me a little bit of background. I know there was a lot of beliefs that you were starting to mention and starting to talk about, and we just like kiboshed it and said, okay, let's save that for the recording. So let's get going with it. But I'm excited to hear. So let's just jump into what was it like as a child growing up? What were the circumstances? What were the beliefs? What was going on?
Yeah. So I was born in Albany, New York, and my dad was a candy salesman for M&M Mars. So he was a national account manager. I was the coolest kid on the bus, right? So I had sour Skittles 2 years before they come out. Kids are like, "Where'd you get those?" I'm like, "Don't worry about it." You know, free Skittles, Starburst, cavities, everything. It was awesome. But we quickly moved to Northern Virginia, and I was telling Tim, my brother, Chris, he's 3 years older than me. He was born with a syndrome called Aperts Syndrome. And basically, it's a physical disability, four functioning fingers on each hand. His face certainly looks different. He has a scar from one ear all the way over to the other. He had 23 surgeries by the time he was 18. And one of the beliefs early on in my life, even though he was 3 years older, is he looked different. And so everywhere that we went, I have this story that screams at me of us going to a Six Flags amusement park and the amount of judgmental glances and glares at my brother. We're waiting in a line. I was way shorter than him. I think I was like 7 years old, and I'm standing on my tippy toes to keep people from staring at him. And there
Mm,
was this belief that happened in me where I started to just feel this wanting to and needing to fight for the underdog. And, there was this moment where he was a senior in high school and I was a freshman. And my mom used to substitute teach, and she would go to the school and see him at lunch sitting all alone. And all throughout high school, he would be by himself. And then when I was a freshman, I said, "Hey, Chris, come on over to our table and come hang out. And I know you're a senior, but hey, come be with us." And there was this moment of genuine community. And again, we've all been in high school, so it wasn't always easy, right? It was like, "No, I'm trying to date this girl. Leave me alone," or whatever was there. But in the truest moments of my being, I was able to fight for that underdog, and he was able to come and be a part of my life. He didn't go to traditional college. I then moved up to St. John Fisher here in Rochester, New York, a private school, and he would spend the night at the dorms every once in a while, and he kind of got that college experience, and it just quickly started this belief in me that everybody has a story to tell, regardless of what they look like, regardless of where they come from. And again, it just started to really unwind and start to widen my worldview of who are those people out there, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their backgrounds, that maybe feel muted, or they feel like
mm,
their story doesn't matter, or they feel like because they sat alone at the table, or because they don't have this big loud outgoing personality, that somehow their story doesn't matter.
mm.
And so again, I'll kind of stop there, but that's really how my upbringing started to shape what I do today.
So I mean, I'm filled with questions on that because one of the things that I have seen throughout many interviews is sometimes that belief is formed where we just accept the mantle of that because of the experience. And then sometimes it's as simple as mom might have said, "Hey, well, watch out for your brother today." And
Yeah.
we immediately take on where did that,
Mm.
where did that come from? Was it something that came from an internal source where you just felt like, "Hey, I need to step up and protect," or was it something that was kind of given as an instruction? And do you feel like it's an obligation? Do you feel at any time, is that a burden that you have to bear, or is it something that you embrace genuinely?
Yeah. Well, again, it was my life, so I didn't know any different. I thought
Hmm.
we call him Bub. I just thought everybody had a Bub, you know. And I mean, he would come back from surgeries, and we'd have a stay-at-home like hospital bed that was super high elevated. He had a dinner tray, and he got to play video games. And I'm like 4 years old, going like, how come I don't get that kind of service? You know, like what's going on? And so there's pictures of me sitting up in his bed with him with a dinner tray and just reaping all the benefits of his recovery. Um, but I share that because early on it was just my life, and it's like, this is my brother, and I don't think any different. I've seen him all the time. I see his face, I see his fingers, I see his deformities, but I've seen them all my life. And so I think it was once we hit that middle school, really that judgmental, you're forming your identity window, that's when it started to feel, I guess, where there was a bit of a burden. It was, hey, I want to go hang with my friends. I want to go impress this girl, or I want to go just do something on my own. And that's when my parents would say, well, hey, maybe include your brother, or hey, maybe try this. And, I think it's a really good question, though, Tim, because I think a lot of times in life, um, I know for me in my own experience, a lot of times you can wear things that you've never, you were never supposed to wear. And maybe a better way to say it is, it's possible um, to wear something for a season, but not to keep it for a lifetime, right? Because I think um, it's hard enough to carry my own life, which is again part of the faith dynamic of my
Hmm.
story. But to have to carry the burden of somebody else is not what I see with fighting for the underdog. Um, Maybe a better way to say it would be, I feel like with his story and with many others that I've worked with and talked with, I can kind of pull back the curtain a bit and show them a preferred future, or show them a new path or a new destination. And I think a lot of times when you're stuck in isolation, whether you have a disability or not, when you're stuck in isolation and you're just looking at the one issue that's in front of you, it's so difficult to get your head up and say, well, what's actually possible? And so again, with him, it was a burden. And I think as I started to pursue God's call on my life, it opened up an avenue and an opportunity for him to do the same.
Wait, so it opened up an opportunity for your brother to feel the same way?
Yeah. So what I mean by that is, I think for anyone listening to this, when you do what you've been put on this planet to do, it gives people permission to pursue the best in their life as well. That when you're out of alignment with the things that you should be doing or thinking or whatever it is, it impacts people around you, whether you acknowledge it or not. And so my brother was one of the closest people to my life. And my first job, I actually worked in youth development at a church. And again, he just followed suit, and he started to volunteer there. He got baptized at this church, and he started to find purpose and come alive where it didn't require Mike anymore, but he was building his own friendships and his own relationships. And so again, I think that's really what ended up happening was, he needed a little bit more of a jump than maybe a traditional experience that someone would have. And I think that, through me being true to who I am and who God's called me to be, it just started to kind of pull back that curtain on his own life to say, man, what's possible for me?
Hmm.
And again, I could talk forever about my brother being my hero. And, imagine for a second, if you're listening to this, waking up every day and knowing that you look different, and knowing that you're not going to wake up today with a normal face. You're not going to wake up today with normal hands. Every single day is stacking upon itself. And yet, every day, he takes a shower, he gets dressed, he goes into work. Um, he has no mental disability. It's just a purely physical disability. And he braves the day and takes on the day. And again, I
Hmm.
think he has no idea that his message more impacts me than anything I will or have been able to do for him.
So let's explore that a little bit, because I know I've talked with other individuals that have had situations, and whether it was physical or even a mental disability in any way, there is still that. I don't like the word burden, and I apologize. I don't know what word to use here. I'm maybe it's responsibility. Maybe it's the amount of additional work that sometimes you come to resent in a manner. But then, like you just mentioned, as you were embracing the calling and as you were embracing and understanding why God put you here, you realize that this is really, you're getting more of a benefit from your brother than you're giving him. But maybe as a middle school child, like you just said, you're like, dude, I just want to be free of this for a little
Sure.
while. But then you come back and you, so let's kind of walk through that process, because I know some
Yeah.
people do carry that. And then, quite frankly, and I'm just going to be straight with you because this is one of the things that I have seen, is that you carry a little bit of guilt because there was a moment in time when you regretted, or you looked at it and you're kind of carrying a little bit of that guilt, like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. And it was just a
Well, I mean,
moment of,
we're brothers, right?
yeah,
So like we're playing tackle football upstairs and I'm getting pissed because he's like, whatever. And so I remember hitting him really hard and he ended up, I didn't hit him in the face, but he ended up like hitting his head on something and his braces got stuck in his, whatever. And then I get this moment of like, oh my gosh, like, why did I do that? What's going on? But we're brothers. I mean, like he
yeah.
makes me mad and he steals the video game and, whatever happens. But, um, the normal maturing burdens, of course, when I was a kid were there, but I think where the guilt hit, and this is again, I feel like I could get emotional talking about this, but where the guilt hit was when I was advancing in my life. So it was me graduating college, getting a job, stepping into a career, meeting a spouse, having kids, and realizing that in the normal progression of life, that he may not go that same path. And so there were these moments, and still are these moments, when we just took a family vacation to Florida with all the family and he's at home and that's okay. He's got a job, he's doing his thing. But I think there's a lot of people listening that sometimes, and this is going to sound funny, they're not willing to have fun or to celebrate the incredible things in life because they're worried about what someone else is going to
Mm.
perceive it as. I think about when we had our first kid, the amount of stories even in our family of miscarriages and stillborn babies and really devastating, heartbreaking things, and us kind of wearing that and going like, well, how can we post this and share this where it's still sensitive and this. And again, I'm not trying to be dissensitive with this statement, if that's even a word. Um, I, we need to celebrate the gifts and the blessings that we've received. Period. There is nothing more beneficial to people going through difficulty, hardship, than seeing a North Star, seeing the blessings that can come. And again, whether that's my brother or anybody that's going through hardship. And so I think for me, the bigger burdens, Tim, came as I was maturing and getting older, and they still live with me now. Of um, I get to have a sleepover with my best friend every night. I get to wake up to my kids whether I want to or not. Time for breakfast, and those mundane moments he doesn't get to participate in, and that is not a daily burden that I wear, but I have moments where it just feels overwhelming for me because it's not something I can solve, right?
Mm.
In business, you can solve things. In family, you can solve things. Personal, faith, all those components. But there's some things on this planet that we simply can't solve. I've heard people say there's problems to solve and tensions to manage.
Mm.
And I think with him, it's, and I'm not saying this about him as a person, but there are moments where it's more of the tension to manage. How can Uncle Bub be a part of what we're doing without me feeling like he needs to be at our dinner table every single day, and trying to balance those things?
So what was the moment or the elements of, I want you to go ahead and walk into where the shift is at, but in this component here, we can see the situation. You can see your life could have been completely consumed by that, but yet you've shifted out of that into, whether it's an overprotectiveness of the underdog. Sometimes people will lose themselves in that, but yet you seem to have managed to be able to maintain your own identity and yet still be able to fight for the underdog. So let's walk through that kind of a shift or that perspective
Yeah.
of where you're at directly, because of the fact that sometimes it consumes you. I mean, just to be
Yeah.
honest with you, there's sometimes when you're taking care or you feel like you need to protect somebody, it consumes you and that's your entire identity. And yet when you started this, it was, no, that's not my identity. My identity is, and you gave us a very good example, husband, father, on. Um, so how did that transpire in your mind and what was the shift like in your mind for that part of it?
Yeah, so it was really interesting because, like I mentioned earlier, it was just my life. So I wasn't trying to form my identity, it was forming, right? And I think that's probably the majority of our stories. We all come from somewhere.
Right.
And that's just simply where I came from. And so when I took my first job in youth development, 60% of the students that were coming to our program were being raised without their biological father in their home. I wasn't trying to be a replacement dad, but what was happening is I was fighting for the underdog again. And I had experienced that in my entire upbringing. So I was able to step into a role that I was absolutely prepared for. Now, I didn't realize that at the time, but it was one of those God given opportunities where, and I'm sure whether you're a faith person or not listening to this, when you're in those moments of alignment, you can't describe it, you can't, earn it or deserve it or any of those things. But when you're in that moment, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, and these are exactly the people that I'm supposed to be serving. That was that 6 year window for me, where I was fighting for the underdog. I was with these students. Um, I'm now I'm outside of ministry. I run a marketing agency now, and one of the first clients that I had in the marketing agency, uh, crazy story. I won't say the names just for uh, I guess uh, security reasons or whatever. But um, my first year and a half, I was just a simple social media manager. That the guy that hired me was a marketing consultant that stole over $150,000 from the business owner, committed grand larceny, and went to jail. Now, just keep in mind, I was working at a church for 6 years, and I'm like, all right, cool. Let me put my big boy pants on and get a real job. And then that's my first experience. I'm like, what's going on? I mean, this is crazy out here, right? And in that moment, I'm sitting in the owner's office, $3 million company. The guy's looking at me with tears in his eyes, going, I know you're just the social media manager, but I need you to help us, get this train back on the tracks, make money with spending a little bit, like how can we grow this thing? And boom, I was fighting for the underdog again. And in this moment, in my first year of going from social media manager to VP of marketing, we went from a 3.5 to a $6 million company in year one. And the best part was we decreased the marketing spend by 66%. So there was this moment for me, Tim, where it wasn't just the feel good fighting for the underdog, but it was this moment of, I'm actually really good at this. And again, I know that's weird to say when you're kind of starting out in your 20s, but I was in my early 30s. I know who I am. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. And in this moment, it was kind of this aha, very similar to I felt in that youth development role, where I was finding my skills, my abilities. They were starting to align with the opportunities that were in front of me. And it was this moment where I always had confidence, but my competence was finally there. And so I was able to grow his business. They did 12 million this past year. They became my first client when I jumped out on my own and started an agency in 2020. And again, as each client has continued to come, we're a boutique marketing agency. So we're finding those $3 to $5 million companies, those $1 to $3 million companies. They don't have 20, 25K a month to spend with some of these bigger agencies, but they still want to show up online and tell their story. And so we've been able to help people unmute their message and really fight for the underdog. That's really that best kept secret. And we've been able to turn them into a household name.
So this one concept, and you mentioned this, and I want to go back because I don't want to skip this. This discovery of this meshing of passion and purpose and calling with what you now are discovering as far as skills and talents. I, that that's stuff that people dream about. That's stuff that I wish I could do that. I wish I could actually figure out where I'm good and what I'm good at. How would somebody be able to figure that out? How would they be able to kind of discover this and then combine those passions along with their skills and their talents? And basically that's what this narrative is all about. Is we have all of these experiences and we have all of these beliefs that we formed from those experiences. And then we've got all these skills and talents. And now It's like, how do we bring that all together to write and craft and form the narrative moving forward?
Yeah, there's a faith term that people will use of what's my calling is a way people will say purpose, right? And the biggest, I guess, question to that question of what is my calling is whose voice are you listening to?
Mm.
And I think where a lot of us struggle is we're listening to that dad who had all those expectations over our life from an early age. You should get into finance, or you should be a doctor, or you should do these things. And so we start going into these careers where we're listening to the voice of a well-meaning individual that we love, but it doesn't align with our passion. Again, you may be listening to this and you may totally empathize with that, or you may know someone that does. But that's a critical question, Tim, is whose voice are you listening to? In the world of social media, we have so many people that are simply posting things for more likes and more engagement, but it's completely opposite of anything that they care about or really want to put their passion and energy behind. And so if we're just doing things for the approval of other people, we will always be out of alignment every time. And so for me, I'm a recovering people pleaser. It's what I say on any podcast or things that I'm on. That means I'm in recovery, so still very much a people pleaser. But the idea is, I, for years, would always be looking for just affirmation, right? I think as we grow up, we always get signs of how we're doing. You get report cards, you're on sports and you get those fake little participation trophies. And, as each stage goes, you fill out college applications. Okay, cool, I got in. And you keep progressing and you get these little parameters of, okay, I'm progressing, I'm improving. And then you get dumped on this real world roller coaster, and there is no more assessment period. It's not, how am I doing as a dad? How am I doing as a employee? What's this look like? What's this? And before you know it, you're in your mid 50s and you're going like, how did I do? Is there any kind of assessment here? And I think if we're not careful, and I'm speaking to myself when I say this, like, we will numb ourselves with Netflix and alcohol and, living for the weekend and kind of doing some of these other things. They're not bad in isolation. Again, I do all those things, but I think the idea is, a lot of times if we're not in our calling or in our purpose, we will just try to maintain. We will just try to go into self-preservation mode where I don't want to risk getting hurt. I don't want to risk anything. And I think especially as men, Tim, and I'm sure you see this with some of the guys that you coach, um, as you get a family and as you get these other dependents upon you, the pressure of dropping something or losing something or taking a risk, that risk meter starts to go down when you get older because you have more people that are counting on you. And again, there's nothing that your kids or your spouse or your legacy will value more than you living a life in your purpose. Nothing. There's no bank account number. There's no huge house that you're going to donate or give back. Living in your purpose is answering the question, whose voice are you listening to?
Mm. I love that question. I mean, like, that I think is an absolutely key question and that's part of the whole aspect of the narrative and whose narrative are you living in? And we've spoken about that on several different podcasts, several different recordings. Which narrative are you going to live? Which voice are you going to listen to? And man, that's just incredible. So let's look at, how do you craft your life right now? What are the things, habits, routines, things that this is how I can write and craft my narrative. These are the things that are important to me. These are my priorities. What are those things for Mike?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think we live in a time right now where everyone's got the perfect secret sauce, right? I wake up at 4 a.m. and I jump in my ice bath, and then I go in my sauna, and then I run 17 miles, and then it's 6 o'clock and I start my day. And you're like, okay, well, I'm a terrible human because I don't do that.
Not only
But
that,
again,
my kids were up at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m.
there
There's
you
no
go.
way.
Yeah, not a chance. But yeah, I think for me, man, and I mean this with everything inside my being. I want to be an exceptional husband. I want to be an incredible dad. I have mentors in my life whose kids are well on graduated and they still call their dad for advice and they still want to come over and share a meal with him. I just want my kids to love me. I want my wife to love me. Um, with everything that I have, I mean that. And so for me, if that's the core of me, then everybody else gets what's left. And again, I think we live in a culture where it goes like, well, does that mean that they're getting scraps and you're not performing well at work and those things? Quite the contrary, because if I am healthy, if I am well, excuse me, if it is well with my soul, then I can show up well for the people that are in my care. And for me, the number one sign of wellness is my faith. It's waking up and it's reading the word, being able to journal and just let the stuff that's in me just come out of me. And again, I do that in the form of journaling and writing. Some people pray, some people meditate or do yoga. Wherever you find yourself, just getting the things in you out. And for me, the beginning of the day is an awesome place to do that because, as Tim alluded to, I'm waking up at 5:30, with not an alarm clock. Haven't set one of those in probably 4 or 5 years now. Um, we have, roosters that crow that happen to be my kids. And so, for me, I can wake up with chaos and I can choose to live in that chaos from the moment I wake up, or I can get them breakfast. I can set aside that time. When my kids get old enough, they're gonna see the example that I set and say, every morning my dad would grab a cup of coffee and he would take time for himself because in order for me to be myself for others, I have to first be my best for myself. In order to be the best for others, I have to first be the best for myself.
Yeah, and I love exactly where you're at with that. What is one, if you were going to give advice to somebody, what would be the one thing that you say, I can't live without this time? Like you said, I get up, I have the coffee, and I do some of
Yeah.
that. Like what are some of those things that you're like, man, I do this and this refreshes me, and I know, and you said this too,
Yeah.
because some people are like, I get up and I do a 17-mile run and I do an ice bath, and
Yeah.
you're just
Yeah.
like, dude, that ain't me. That totally
Yeah.
ain't
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
But what is it? What are some
Yeah.
things that you are like, man, I have to have this in my life in order to be well? And I love the way you put that. I mean, if I'm well, then I can show up well for others and make other people well. What are those things?
It's a very easy answer for me, Tim. The one thing I need in my life every day is peace. And if I have peace, I can show up absolute, absolutely clear, precise for whatever is in front of me. Yet, every day, sometimes in the middle of the night, peace is being stolen from me. And the issue lies in if we try to get our peace back from the people that stole it from us, it's going to be this never ending exchange that we just simply can't win. And so for me, um, during COVID, I hated running. I absolutely hated it. But I was home and you know, hey, let me step out. Let me try to. I went for a mile run. I stopped at 0.73 miles and I just puked everywhere in the neighborhood because I was like, I can't do this. It's disgusting, right? And I just set it out and I said, you know what, I'm gonna keep running until every day until I get to a mile. And then I got to a mile and then I was like, I'm gonna try two. And all throughout COVID, I just started running, 2 or 3 times a week, whatever it ended up being. And I ended up signing up for the LA Marathon, and I ran a marathon in 2021, 26 miles from a guy that was puking, doing one. Now, my piece, and this is, I know you're listening to this, you're like, shut up, never doing that, don't care, turning off the podcast now. That's okay. And maybe that running part is not for you, but for me, that's an avenue where I can find peace. And maybe for you, it's going out on a boat and going fishing, or it's, there's a book, What Fills Your Bucket. And maybe for you, it's, hey, once a week, I just got to go grab beers with the boys and just watch a basketball game or a football game or something. That's okay. It doesn't have to be, of course, the physical side of running, there's benefits there, but it really is more of the mental thing for me. Now,
Mm.
here's the kicker. Every time I put my shoes on, my wife looks at me and goes, you're not going for a run, are you? Because in her mind, when I run, she's stuck with the kids for, an hour and a half, however long I'm gone. And I've had to have a tremendous amount of conversation with her to say, this is the time that I need to show up at my best. And so again, if you're in a relationship, if you're in a marriage or wherever you find yourself, it's important that people that are in your closest circle understand what are those non-negotiables for your peace. Because for me, peace is that answer to your question, Tim. That
Hmm.
if I can have peace, then I can be productive. I can uh, be at my best.
Yeah, I'm sure we could extend this and we could go for hours, maybe even on this whole aspect of being able to put the boundaries around and being able to have a wife that understands and having those hard conversations and dealing with the conflict. And like you just mentioned, that's a whole nother topic, but I'm glad you recognized it. I'm glad that you actually put it out there because it is difficult. There are going to be, I'll use word barriers, but they're well intended and they're just looking at like, I need to find my piece. So you have to recognize that and push that through in order to be able to gain that. And I love that you just mentioned that. Is there anything that's on your heart that you're like, man, I just need to get this and I need to share this one piece of wisdom or advice? Is there something there that's just like, man, I got to get it out?
Yeah. I love the legacy season of life. I'm seeing it with my dad, who's in his 60s, and figuring out when is he going to retire and when is he going to, kind of step into something fresh and something new. And I think for those listening that are maybe in that empty nest window, or maybe they're in a space where they feel like their purpose has passed them by, or they feel like there's an up and coming generation that's so sharp and they have all the time in the world and their energy is high. Um, my encouragement would be that God's not done with you. My encouragement would be that if you're listening to this and if you find yourself in a season where you're lacking purpose, or again, when we're talking about things like calling and all those things, maybe your mind immediately goes to past tense and you think that the best years of your life are behind you. And my encouragement would be, and this is for you too, Tim, my encouragement would be that the absolute best years of your life are still in front of you. And, there is still fresh purpose and fresh peace available for you today. That's my encouragement.
There you go. All right. If somebody wanted to get in contact with you, how would they do it? What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, my marketing agency is Thomas Media Group. So you can go to thomasmediagroup.co. That's CO. You can follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram, Mike Thomas. My Instagram is Michael L. Thomas. And we do some one-on-one business coaching consulting, which is certainly would love to have a discovery call with anybody that's interested. And then if you're listening, if you got a business that's looking to show up better online, we do anything from social media management to Google Ads and SEO and all that stuff, just to help you continue to get your business's message out there. So appreciate
Love
the
it.
time.
Still fighting for that underdog, man. Still going after it.
That's the plan.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So awesome. Thanks again for being here. And those listening, again, this is what we want from you. And this is my one ask. If something resonated, if something touched you, make sure you reach out to us, whether it's myself or you reach out directly to Mike. And that's why people are on here, is because that you reaching out with what touched you and influenced, or something that really meant something to you, something that was said that meant a lot to you. That's the reason why we do it. It gives us fulfillment. It allows us to be able to continue. So please reach out. Let us know what touched your life. So until next time, keep writing, crafting your story, because each story is important. Each story is critical to have and to hold and to keep. So we appreciate you guys. Keep listening. We'll talk soon.